Hey, I'm live, and I'm not alone. Today, we have a guest in studio. But before we do that, before we talk about who's here, let's talk about this. Is it going to work? Here we go. Helps to have the fader turned in.
People always asking, what do cops do? Do we got quotas? Or is it all true? Well, let me break it down, let me set the tone. No ticket quotas, no, we on our own. But let me tell you something, let me make it clear, I write 'em up. Yeah, I got no fear, I'm out here patrolling, keeping the streets clean, writing tickets. Baby, that's how I mean. You break the law, well, I'll give you a fine. Don't cross the line, yeah, I'm on it all the time. But if you play it cool, we can get along. Just drive safe, baby, that's where we belong.
So with me is Chris Hayes, Senior Sergeant with the Victoria Police, and that's in Australia, if you didn't know. I was about to say good day, but how you doing?
No, you can throw as many good days as you like. I was in Texas recently, and I was throwing around howdies like there was no tomorrow. So
howdies are awesome.
yeah, I'm going great. Thanks.
Well, first of all, it's great to have you here, and for those who are watch the show, they recognize that I try and use AI generated music whenever I flip the switch on the show.
Yeah.
Since finding it, so I've had angry drivers who don't speed songs. I've had bluegrass music. Like, this is really neat stuff. But we're not here about that, even though I could talk about it for ages. We're going to talk about what we always talk about, which is traffic safety, traffic law, and police stuff. And I'd love to get the Australian perspective and see what you're doing and the kind of things you do back home.
I'd love to talk about it.
Awesome. I just realized that I got to move a light. Hang on one second. What are we going to talk about first? Hang on. You're in the dark.
I'm in the dark?
Well,
Some might say that's a good thing. But
you were less bright. Well, no, you're bright. We know you're bright.
Thanks.
Okay. If you're watching, just so you know, this is on a bunch of different platforms. We do this every day or thereabouts, and it's on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, Facebook. Like it's everywhere. Which platform are you using the most?
So our corporate communications department try to spread themselves across all platforms. So where it's appropriate, they'll post it. And we've had some really good success with, I wouldn't call it guerrilla media, but I'll give you an example, right? We had our assistant commissioner for road policing, and he was delivering some communications about a particular aspect of road safety. But at the same time, you might have seen this on TikTok. The lower half of the panel was one of these car, like jumping around various obstacles, and just the delivery being so sort of hip and like with it. That was a really interesting way to play it, and it was featured on Daily Dose of Internet. They picked up on it and
Get out.
Yeah, so it's sort of, you talk about like viral communications, and that one for that reason kind of went viral, right?
There's so many reasons things go viral.
Yeah.
And we've had some success. And then we do stuff like this where we're not even worried about going viral. We're just worried about talking to you and making sure you get your answers to all the stuff you want to talk about. If you're watching, and just a quick shout out to the people on the little screen over here, well, you can't see it, but it's over there. That's Instagram. If you want to skip the queue and not wait till I remember that you're there, come over to YouTube. You can go to YouTube.TrafficCop.ca. It'll take you right into our YouTube channel. And regardless of what platform you're on, please like and subscribe, follow, share. Everything that you do to share the value that we give with other people just makes you a good human. It also helps us spread the word. And our ultimate goal is to make the streets safer. The roads, I mean, streets safe is sort of includes all things policing, but we're talking specifically as traffic services about keeping the road safe for everyone who travels on it.
Yep.
You've worked directly with things traffic minded. I know you were involved with some things involving moves of during major events. Have you worked in a traffic capacity as well?
Yeah, so not directly. So I've never actually occupied a role as like a highway patrolman or anything like that. I got bitten by the traffic bug, by the road safety bug, I like to call it, when I came across to become an investigator at the Major Collision Investigation Unit.
Oh, right on.
And so that our role there was to travel across the state of Victoria. Look it up; it's in the southeast corner of Australia, and we would respond to fatal and serious injury collisions where certain criteria applied, like there was suggestion of criminality on the part of the surviving driver. But if you just take that definition out for a moment, it was really about going and finding out the truth about what took place, and then holding people to account where it was necessary.
It's funny you say holding people to account. I think that is the number one thing that we do as police officers, regardless of what area of law or issue we're focused on. And when people get upset that we issue tickets for activities they took part in, they say it's us taxing them. But really, we're just documenting it and making sure we hold them accountable for the choices they've made.
Yeah. And you can opt out of that tax too. I think that's the important thing to remember is that, if you think that you're saving a heap of time traveling 20 kilometres over the speed limit, actually take the time to do the maths. If you're prepared to take that risk and subject other people to the same risk, take the time to do the maths and figure out just how few seconds you're actually saving on that trip, because you'll shock yourself and you might actually change your mind about it.
It's funny that you bring that up. I reference that on a regular basis, and people argue with me. No, if you do the math, 20% faster, okay, that's a sustained drive. And I give it to them. If you do 100 miles at 20 miles over the speed limit or kilometers over the speed limit, you will get that bonus. But the reality is you're not doing that. You're stop and go, you're up and down. And I took a video using my dash cam where I drove to work. And I never needed to touch my brakes once. I was in cruise control on the right side of the road, and I guess it would be the left side of the road in Australia.
Yep.
And I just had a nice, relaxing drive to work. And everybody else was passing me like I wasn't moving. But oddly enough, I was passing them when they were slamming the brakes, a few hundred meters up the road. Yeah. So I thought that was really telling, but people still argued that I was wrong.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that you're driving as part of a broader system, and there are other people trying to optimize that system. So when you think about like our traffic control rooms, the people who build and engineer our roads, they're trying to get the most people across in the least amount of time with the available space. So that's like a mathematical challenge. And so all the speed limits you see are actually designed to smooth the flow of traffic. The traffic light sequencing is designed to ensure that people keep moving and can expect to get to their destination at a particular time. If you try and beat or game the system, and you're traveling at 120 in a 100 zone, all you're doing is racing to a red light.
Yes. Where
you're going to wait longer instead of conserving your fuel, driving smoothly, not going through brake pads every few months. So I think that's the thing that perhaps doesn't get seen by the public, and I don't think it needs to be seen. Like how deep do you want to dive into your road network? It gets a bit dry.
Well, it's exciting for me, but not for everybody. Right. I get that. Yeah. Before we get too far, and I completely forget to mention, I say it's like a commercial break. It's not. They don't pay me anything. But Vision Zero Enforcement Team, they are a dedicated group of officers that focus on traffic safety, traffic law, and they do that through, I guess, education through enforcement. They're focused on changing driver behavior one ticket at a time. And they focus on specifically the big four: speeding, aggressive driving, distracted driving, impaired driving. And today they are focused on those efforts in 32 Division and 55 Division, neighborhoods like Downsview, Willowdale, Newtonbrook, Bathurst Manor, the Beaches, Riverdale, Danforth, East York. Did I say any of those twice? Sometimes it feels like I say them all. I say them so frequently that they all blend together. But they're in neighborhoods where real people live, work, and play and deserve to be safe. And we announce them on our channels every morning on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We put them there because the people who live in those communities really like to know that we're there working to make it safer for them. Now, that's not to say that these are the only police officers doing enforcement. We have officers who are changing driver behavior across the city, but these officers do nothing but work for those or work to find those that are specifically making the roads less safe for everybody else, while other officers may be distracted by 911 calls and going to rush to the scene of other things where people need help. These officers are focused on one area, and they make a tremendous change.
Yeah. We've got a similar structure with our state highway patrol. They don't really have divisional boundaries. They just go where the intelligence tells them that they need to be. And similarly, we try not to distract them with any calls for service or collision response. But they're out there, and I think it's important to recognise that we talk about enforcement a lot. And you mentioned education. When you pair those two together, that's what works.
Well, we do a lot of education right here. We're here to answer questions. I mean, obviously, we're telling people what's right, what's wrong in terms of the rules of the road, the ones that we know are serious. We'll answer the questions, even of the non-serious ones, but we're not necessarily focused on issuing tickets for them, even though they're available to us if need be. But, if people know what the rules are, and understand the impact of the decisions to break them, maybe they'll self-regulate. They'll choose not to play the game. But for those who don't get the message, we have enforcement, and sometimes that enforcement is pretty serious. I'm starting to smile because I'm thinking of what's the word for it for the folks that stunt drive. There's a specific term that's used in Australia and New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
Hoons.
Hoons, that's it.
Yeah.
And do you crush cars in Australia?
Eventually we do. If the message doesn't get through the first time we impound the car, the court can order that the vehicle be destroyed or sold.
I think that's awesome. I think that, here, and you can give me the Australian perspective, here, if you are charged with stunt driving, and there's about 15 different offenses that qualify, from a jackrabbit start where you turn out in front of a oncoming traffic upon light changing, or just before or just after it turns green, you turn out in front of them before they have even had a chance to respond. That's stunt driving. 50 kilometers over the speed limit if it's 80 or above, 40 kilometers over the limit if it's under 80, or 150 anywhere. And then there's, drifting and all that jazz. Those come with a wonderful 30-day driver suspension, 15-day vehicle impound, and then on conviction, that's roadside instantaneously. On conviction, you're looking at 1 to 3 year further suspension or disqualification. You're looking at $2,000 to $10,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. And then a second offense, it goes up to from 1 to 3 years to 3 to 10 years, and on a third and subsequent conviction, it's just lifetime.
Yeah.
Do you have a similar process there?
Yeah, and I'd almost describe it as identical.
Really?
Yeah, and it recognises that hooning isn't just lighting up the back tyres and generating a big cloud of smoke. It's those organised races or time trials. It's grossly exceeding the speed limit. We also have repeat drink and drug driving categories of offending where you can expect to have your vehicle impounded. Similarly, if you insist on driving without a license, well, we'll insist on taking your car. So it sort of marries up with this notion that we need to restrict access to the roads from those people who really don't get it.
But there's this belief, and I'm sure it's global, that driving is a right as opposed to a privilege.
Yeah, and you could debate that, and various schools of thought, like professional schools of thought, you consider, for example, occupational therapy. Returning a person to occupation. That's their priority, and if that involves driving, well, that's part of their sort of medical view of getting a person back into society, into the community. But should people be driving? Should it be deemed as a right? My position is that, my personal opinion is that no one should die on the way to work.
No kidding. Or
to school or picking up the groceries, but people do. And that's the part that I really don't like. I think in the human condition, there's an appetite for risk, especially when you're in your 20s, right? I did some bungee jumping. I wouldn't do it again. I think you can do it. Can you hang off the CN tower here?
There's no jumping or dangling, but yes, you can walk around on a flat surface while chained.
No, thank you. I'll pass. But once upon a time, I would. And I think that's my point, is that there is a place for risk taking, and I think it has moved us forward as a human race, right? We wouldn't have been to the moon. Conspiracy theorists just opt out of this conversation, but we wouldn't have been to the moon without that appetite for risk. But it doesn't belong on the roads.
There are places where you can take risks, controlled environments. I often talk about racetracks, and a racetrack where you have a medical team, and a tow team, a fire team, all there. I mean, when we have the Honda Indy, which by the way we plan to attend again and have a booth there, they have basically a field hospital. They can do surgery there because they know what the risks are. And when people drive at the speeds that some of these Indy cars go, I mean, we've had people 305 kilometers an hour on the 401, our main highway here. They're really stupid to really, and I say that with all the love I can, but that's not a smart move.
No, it's not, and it doesn't recognize that they're not the only participants in that environment. That there are people who don't want to be subject to that risk, that kinetic energy that just the human body just cannot escape the immutable laws of physics. Right, at some point, it's unsurvivable.
There's a whole lot of science that goes into whether we survive. And people think that just because a car is new and fancy and has bembo brakes and they can just do things. In fact, I recently shared on the channel, I reshared it. It was the TAC video where the chaps got two cars. I think they're Falcons. And then a big rig pulls out and one's doing 60 and one's doing 65. And they both make contact, but one has serious damage. Aside from the fact that people say, well, these are old cars, it would never happen. And they just have all these excuses. Well, new cars wouldn't do that, or airbags. People don't realize how fragile we are. And if it wasn't for the modern science and medicine and yes, vehicle manufacturer design, people wouldn't survive half the collisions they do today.
Yeah. A few things that TAC video that was Peter Bellion, one of our reconstruction experts. He's no longer in policing. I've still got contact with him. He's a great guy. So shout out to him because he's forged the pathway for a lot of us who followed afterwards. But those were two sedans as well, I should point out.
Yeah.
These aren't Rams or Ford F-150s. If you consider the pedestrian that's crossing the road, that kid, that vulnerable road user, those collisions, the survivability of those collisions changes drastically when you start to change the shape of the front of the car.
For sure.
Another shout out too to Graham. Have you met Graham?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so Graham is a fictional person, and the TAC developed Graham as the example of what a human body needs to look like to survive a collision. And I don't know if you can pop something up later on, but
let's make it happen.
I'm not sure how his Tinder profile would be going. We'll bring him up. I mean, there's a lid for every pot, but we'll show you Graham.
TAC?
Yeah, I reckon that'll do it.
Oh, yes, I have seen this.
You have seen Graham?
Okay, let me see if I can get just photos rather than... And for everyone who's wondering, why is the answer to my question? We're getting to your questions.
Yeah,
Give us a moment.
He's if you take biomechanical scientists and give them the task of designing a human that could survive road trauma, or at least better survive road trauma, then what they've developed is this character Graham.
He's a good-looking chap.
I find this a really good way to express the challenge, right?
Yeah, there you go. This is Graham, and he's the ultimate. He'd be able to survive impact. Is that the goal?
Yeah, some types of impact, a better surviving impact. So you can see his skull's shaped differently. His neck, well, I'm not sure if you could call it a neck. It's pretty much, actually, it's a good representation. These hands devices that race car drivers use. So imagine that, but in a flesh and bone sort of configuration, right? So that's Graham. And when you mentioned the TAC advertisements, that popped up because we're very well known for this style of communication.
Well, they have brilliant stuff, and it's things that make you go ugh and scare you, but they're for the right reason. They create thought and discussion, but in many countries they don't want to share it because it makes people scared.
Yeah, and it is impactful, but I do wonder sometimes if the shock value reaches the wrong audience. I think we're changing minds that are already changed.
Well, there's that, and there's an opinion that you can't actually force or scare someone into it. I mean, most people nowadays will look at it and say, "Well, that's CGI," and that's some of the comments. It just doesn't have that factor. It doesn't have the effectiveness. But I still think they're brilliant at what they do, and that's a fantastic. I don't know. I don't know if you'd be a dancer with that body style, but either way,
that's right.
All right. We've gone off and haven't chatted about you for a little bit. Just a reminder that we are downloading this episode, as we do with all episodes, and putting them up on podcasting platforms so you can synchronize, listen to the great content, and not break the law in doing so. Because you can't watch us live, and you'd be eligible for a wonderful ticket for $615. What is it for distracted driving in Australia?
Putting me on the spot here. Look, I'd have to take that on notice, but it's up there. It's I think we're approaching the 800 mark for using a mobile phone handset.
Really?
And add to this new technology we've actually just brought out. This isn't police doing this. This is the partnership. This is the Department of Justice and the Department of Transport working together. But we have these trailer-mounted cameras. So imagine just a regular trailer, with some generators, a boom that goes over 2 lanes of traffic, and a suite of cameras that look down into the windshields of
Really?
passing cars. We're looking for distraction through cameras. We're looking for seatbelt use. Seatbelt's a big one, right?
It's funny that seatbelt has been, it's a big one. It's a huge traffic safety issue, and people think that airbags replace seatbelts. They don't understand that it works in conjunction with, and that airbags alone can actually create some serious injury as they deploy at 200 miles per hour. But who's counting? I find, like, I've written so few seatbelt tickets because I think that the average person wears them now. It doesn't seem to be such an issue. I can't drive the car. I feel naked if I'm not wearing the seatbelt. I've been driven in classic cars that have no seatbelts, and it feels wrong to me.
Right.
I was taking our 57 Chevy to the Honda Indy last year, and it was like, oh, this feels just wrong. But anyway, it is a huge issue, and I love the fact you've got an enforcement ability for it. Do you then go electronic ticketing? You can just issue a ticket and to the driver or to the vehicle? Because our electronic ticketing currently in Ontario sends a ticket to the registered owner. It's an owner responsibility charge. So there's no demerit points, and it's just the driver pays a fee.
Okay. Yeah. Look, the automated ticketing process does go to the registered owner of the vehicle, who they can then nominate who was driving at the time, which creates some challenges as well. But
Yes.
The idea is sound that if you weren't driving, if it was mum or dad, then they cop the fine. At this stage, we rely on the registered owner's details.
And does it also carry demerit points against the registered owner's driver's license?
For detection, if they're the ones who are responsible for that offence, then yes.
Really? So that's the one thing that's different. And I think it would be great if we had the same thing. Because while insurance companies don't much care about points, it allows the ministry to track and then have consequences such as suspension and instruction.
Well, for us, if it's a safety offence, so this is not like an administrative offence, it's failing to notify the roads authority of a change of address. That's administrative. You're not going to get points for that. But the safety offences, speeding,
Same here.
Seatbelts, mobile handset use, these all attract demerit points.
As they should. The goal, and I put up a video recently talking about the fact that is Waze popular in Australia?
I think it's emerging.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the features is that you can notify Waze and share the location of police who are doing enforcement or working. And then there's a school of thought of, do you like the fact that we know, or do police like the fact that we're saying we're there, thus people slow down? Or do we want to report ourselves as not there because when we're reported as there, people slow down but then speed up as soon as they passed us? And so, slightly controversial take, I report police as not there if they're doing enforcement, but I do report them as there if they are conducting work as a collision or a road closure.
Right.
Because it makes sense. I want to keep my colleagues safe, but I want to keep everybody safe. Thus, I want to have those drivers who are breaking the law stopped and educated, whether it be a warning, a discussion, or a ticket, depending on what that discussion leads to.
I just visited a police agency in Michigan who have a device that broadcasts through Waze when they're actually at the roadside. So the approaching driver will be told that there's an enforcement vehicle ahead.
Really? Mm. Now, is that the HAS?
Yeah.
Okay. I've spoken to the people who created that. Fantastic stuff. I like it if it's for the purposes of a closure or a risk on the road. But I want people to get caught because I don't want them to just change their behavior 5 minutes down the road and kill somebody.
Yeah. I don't think I've made my mind up on that issue. I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Here's a question coming in from TikTok, and is that SHXH? I don't know how to make this username speakable, so I won't. Do you often catch people at illegal drift events? Yes. Now, Hoon events. Do you have takeovers and things like that occur by you?
We do. We tend to see them in the industrial estates, so they stay relatively off the highways. But in Australia, we seem to mirror culture in North America sometimes, and recently we've seen some of these takeover events where dirt bikes will just take over a highway. 50 dirt bikes with no identifiable license plates will take over a highway, and that's pretty unsociable behaviour. But I'll tell you what, it's not anywhere near the level I saw when I first arrived in North America down in the US state of California. I turned on the news. The first story I saw was these, what do they call them, like a sideshow in Oakland.
Okay.
And that was out of control. There were shots fired. Cars were being set on fire.
I saw that.
Yeah, that was absolute mania. So the The answer is yes, but not to that extent.
Well, we deploy amazing amounts of resources to combat these. Not only the takeovers that take place in the streets, but we've changed the laws here to now be able to charge people with stunt driving on private property. So Hoon laws apply on private property as well.
Right. Yeah.
Just to, sadly, we don't, crush their cars.
Yeah, we don't have that. But drink driving laws apply on private property. You shouldn't be behind the wheel of a motor vehicle if you've been drinking. And the other thing we're trying to see whether it's effective or not, but a few of the local municipal councils are bringing in bystander laws. So if you're a spectator at one of these events, then you can expect some sort of sanction from the local level.
I think that makes sense because you're supporting this illegal activity, and they're doing it for your likes, essentially.
Right.
And then York Region, just north of us, they have implemented new bylaws that could fine a business that hosts these events up to $10,000. So they're definitely, everyone is raising the consequences because the folks that are participating are still participating, even though we've had criminal charges laid, all sorts of things. This user who has is that a pizza icon? It says, "Boys, come to Niagara Falls to eat Pizza Depot." Make you some nice. I guess they work or own a Pizza Depot. I've cut carbs. I'm not in pizza mode, but I do like pizza.
Yeah.
So thanks for the invite. Maybe if I'm looking for a cheat day, I'll come by and visit. We've got here, how much time suspension stay on license Ontario? Then they rephrased it. This is from John Singh. How much time suspension stay on license when license suspended for 30 days? So in Ontario, your license is suspended based on it going into activity. It's part of your permanent record. You're always going to see that the suspension existed. It's not a conviction. It's not a charge. It's a suspension. So in terms of being a current file for insurance companies, this is where there's multiple tiers of access. An insurance company can see the most current 3 years. If your suspension is active, they'll see that you were suspended. I don't know if they see previous suspensions. They see convictions. That's what they have access to. But again, police, we see your entire history since even before you were licensed. If you got pulled over at 12 years old when you were not legally driving, that charge stays there forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. Our juvenile offences get expunged once you...
Traffic as well?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it's one of these things. We could probably still see it, but we can't allege it in court. So it's
so for us it's the municipal, it's actually the Ministry of Transportation that holds the entire driving record for your lifetime.
Yeah.
In terms of court, I've never thought about whether or not or even taken into consideration, because it's so rare that we would be looking at someone's entire history for court purposes.
Yeah.
But it allows us to look at it, and that makes people feel uncomfortable, like that we could possibly see that when they were 16 and licensed for 2 days that they were speeding. Like, ooh, we don't care that much. It's old. But it is interesting.
What I found interesting about what you just said was that your insurance companies can see the driving history
for 3 years, the most current 3 years.
Right. Whereas I think we have to actually disclose offending. So it comes down to the reliability of the person who's actually applying for the insurance.
That's very interesting, and I could see issues with that as well, because for us, insurance companies essentially need to figure out the risk, calculate your risk. And if they're asking you to be honest, that may not work. Mind you, they could ask you to go and apply for that full abstract yourself and submit it. Yep. But I could see people like, I wouldn't want to be in the insurance industry, because it's a lot of math and a lot of risk. Yeah,
and you can bet your bottom dollar if you're applying for a payout when you need it.
That's when they want to know.
You haven't disclosed certain things, you're going to find yourself out of pocket.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Are you going to make the speed limit 110 kilometers per hour? That's the question coming in from Alfred. Majority of highways in Ontario are 100 kilometers an hour. They've recently evaluated certain stretches of road and decided that they could be raised to 110 kilometers an hour. It's not every road, but it's certainly stretches of it. And now, of course, people say, well, give us the 10 kilometers. We want it everywhere. But we're not there yet. Speed limits in Australia, what are they on average?
So on a highway, you would expect to find speed limits of 100 kilometres per hour. There are some, like our interstates, where parts of them are 110 kilometres an hour. But what you find on those highways is a bit more point-to-point speed detection, where we get your average speed just to make sure that you're staying within that 110. Because once you get past 110 kilometres per hour, your chances of surviving a mistake are like getting down towards single digits.
I'm glad you bring that up, because the average person in Toronto, in the GTA, travels at about 120 kilometers an hour on our highways. But I know that when I'm driving to work, I'm seeing cars at 130, 140, 150, and that's mixed with erratic driving through traffic that's moving slower. We have a lot of dangerous drivers, and of course we catch a lot of them. We charge a lot of people with stunt driving, but it is interesting that you bring up the survivability, because again, people say, well, I've got a great car, it's got great technology, it's got airbags, I'll be fine. And that's also not taking into consideration the person they hit. And on the highway, they say, well, pedestrians aren't a factor. Okay, when we're talking about expressways. But the people in the other cars, stand it's that speed differential. They stand to be severely injured. A good friend of mine was hit just at a stop sign. She was waiting at a stop sign, and somebody drove into her with an F-150. Life has never been the same, and it's not from tremendous difference. It's the speed differential from a stopped vehicle and one traveling at 60 or 70 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, it changes your life, and for that reason, our default speed limits in side streets and other roads, that's slowly reduced over time. So if you don't see a speed sign in a street that you're driving in, you should assume it's 50.
Same as here.
So 50 kilometers per hour. And then when you get those high pedestrian areas, we get 40s and 30s.
Same as Toronto.
Yeah.
And people lose their minds because, my goodness, we're going slow. But it's funny, when it first changed from 60s to 50s, from 50s to 40s, and 40s to 30s, I was on the camp that said this is slow. But it felt slow until I got used to it, and now it feels normal. It's just a matter of perspective.
Yeah.
And knowing that I can stop a vehicle and save a life because that speed is lower, it makes me feel a lot better about things. And people say, well, that's just a line. No, I really feel better knowing that if a kid, and kids are so unpredictable, and most of these low speeds limits are in place in communities where there are a lot of children in and around schools and so on. So I think it's smart. That's why they're doing it.
So just for your viewers, have you ever done 30 days of keto or 30 days of, some habit or behavior where you're trying to improve yourself? I'd sort of ask them to maybe try 30 days of just sticking to the speed limit and just see what you see. Just feel what it feels like. See what you see. You'll be shocked by how many people are not obeying the speed limit. But just give it a go. Yeah, I just if you can get one of your regulars to maybe take it on as a challenge and report back, I'd love to see the results.
The challenge, the gauntlet is being thrown. You're getting an international, challenge. Can you do it? Try doing the speed limit. I love it. I mean, I do it. Yeah. I do the speed limit, and it is quite normal for me. Yeah. But what is shocking to me is how fast everyone else is going. It is.
And look, we do it because we've got a professional interest in it. Mm-hmm. We do it because we've seen stuff that other people haven't. And I'm not saying you need to come out with us and see the bodies on the roadside. I'm just saying that we've been forced to do the behavior change. We've been forced to adopt the habit. And I can tell you, it's not that bad. You just, it's a different way of traveling. And these are habits.
Yeah.
And your habits, if you're traveling at 130, would you say 140 kilometers per hour? That's a bad habit. And, you're spinning that roulette wheel. Sometime your number's going to come up, right?
Well, there's that, and everyone's doing it, or many people are doing it, and then they're upset when their insurance rates skyrocket. Like, you chose this. Yeah, there's a fine. It's not my fault that I pulled you over for breaking law. It's your fault for breaking law. But this is we have an entitlement problem. I think that's the big thing. It's entitlement.
Yeah.
Everyone's more important than everybody else, and they all have somewhere to go.
Which is a shame, because we live in a cooperative society. The reason I don't know how to build a CN tower, but you've got a CN tower. How did that happen? It's because we all work together.
Yeah.
We come up with rules and laws, ways of working together to achieve things that are beyond the capability of the individual. And to me, road design, road law, transportation, it's all in the same wheelhouse. So for me, it's not that you can wave your flag of independence and opt out of the community. If you're driving a car that you can't build yourself, if you're filling up at a gas station with petroleum that you can't drill yourself, then I think you need to play the game.
It is all about community, and when your life is, when you understand the value of your life, and that it is as important as everybody else on the road, and everybody else on the road has a family that's expecting them to come home, and when you can understand that if your mom was taken out of the game, and I use mom, because that's usually the person people love the most, if they didn't come home because of somebody else doing what you do every day, that should have impact.
Yeah.
And yet most people are still in the cloud of, well, I'm having fun. I bought a car that has a speedometer that goes to 240. I'm going to use the whole speedometer. Like, I've heard every excuse ad nauseum.
Yep.
But I digress. Can I eat a burger while driving? In Ontario, you can. as long as it doesn't impact your ability to safely operate your motor vehicle.
Is it a juicy burger?
Well, those are really risky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been down there. And
No.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that you may have a dry cleaning bill.
Yeah. All right, so dry, an overcooked burger, yes.
You gotta have standards. Right. I've got a friend of mine who teaches driving. He was the head instructor for a major driving school. Now he's a columnist and writer about driver safety. But he says, other than a mint, he wouldn't suggest anything because anything you're doing other than actively driving your car is unsafe. And he's right. But is it illegal is a different question. And it's not specifically illegal, although other provinces have rules like this. In British Columbia or in Alberta, eating a burger could be distracted driving because their laws are so different. How about in Australia?
For us, there's no specific offence, but it would, depending on the observed behaviour, it could fall under careless driving.
So same as here.
Driving without due care, that's a pretty low threshold for an enforcement officer to meet. So, I'd say don't do it. It's
not smart. It's not the best option you could have. But I've been hungry and I've had a burger while I'm driving.
Yeah.
But it's that can you realistically do it safely? And that's only you can make that decision.
The observation I've made is that we've got I don't know how it works here, but our high-speed highways, our interstates, they've got service stations, and you pull off the off-ramp, fill up, get some food, whatever you need to, and then come back on the on-ramp, right? The on-ramp is people digging around, looking for fries, unwrapping burgers. So that's like the most distracted you'll see people coming onto the highway. So that's just the burger thing really jogged my memory.
I like food. I like food that's hot, and I like to not be messy. So I'd prefer to sit at a table for the period of time, enjoy my food, focus on that, rather than be focused on the road and distracted by the food and not really enjoy anything. That's me.
Yeah, and you're right. If you're so hungry, so it's because you've been traveling for a while, right? And you build up a hunger. Well, take a break because it's not just your hunger that needs to be replenished. It's your fatigue that needs to be dealt with as well.
Sure.
And just taking a break, giving your eyes a rest. You guys know this from traveling long distances on highways. That cognitive load, you haven't done it. You haven't really moved your muscles much, but you get to your destination, you're exhausted. That's because the old grey matter's been working ultra hard. So, yeah, that's probably a good thing, right? That sort of mindfulness. You don't have to sit cross-legged and do it, but just sit down, eat your burger, take some time out.
Me time. It's me time.
That's
not
right.
Just meat time. It's me time.
Oh, I like what you did there.
I'm a new G1 driver. I'm going down to the States for hockey. Am I still allowed to drive in the U.S.? So first off, a G1 driver is a learner, not a licensed driver. So as a G1, you're not allowed to drive anywhere but in your own province, technically. Now, here's the problem. When you go to the United States, now, you also have to be supervised by a qualified G-class driver. That's a fully licensed driver with 4 years experience. They can supervise you in Ontario. As soon as you go into the United States, you're up to the discretion of the police officer who pulls you over. They could say, well, I'll accept that you're a learner. That's okay. Or they could choose to charge you because you're technically not covered there. A G2 and above, you are a licensed driver. You are entitled to drive outside of the province. But you're entirely at the whim of the officer pulling you over because technically speaking, I called the Michigan police to clarify, would they accept a G1? And they had to ask around. And it was not a clear answer, which means you could find yourself in hot water. If you were to take your G1 and move, not just visit, but move to another province, you don't get to continue your G1 in their numbering system. You have to reapply from start. So it's not something that is transferable, although it's contentious. Some people have a different opinion. Learner's permits. How does someone learn to drive in Australia?
Yeah, similar arrangement. The graduated licensing system where you go from being a novice driver, age 16, you can get your 17, beg your pardon, get your learner's permit, start to learn how to drive. Then move into your probationary one, P1. That's a red plate that you have to have affixed to your car so that other drivers can see that, all right, you're pretty new to this.
But you can drive alone with the P1.
You can drive alone. You're restricted about how many peer passengers you can have.
Same thing as here.
Right? Then you move to a P2, which is that next graduation in the licensing system before you actually go into a full unrestricted license.
So for us, it's the learner's permit while supervised. Then
Yep.
you get your G2, which means actually you can drive anywhere, anytime. And that is the only step before your full license, but it is anywhere, anytime. But between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m., you're restricted in the first 6 months to having one person under the age of 20.
Okay.
In the second 6 months, the number of people under the age of 20 goes to 3. And of course, you can't have any more than there are seatbelts and zero blood alcohol content and no drugs.
Yep, similar deal. And the power to rate, there are power restrictions on the motor vehicle you can drive.
Fascinating.
Yep.
That's not the case here, although it should be.
Right. Yeah, interesting little evolution of the law. We used to have a solid manufacturing industry in Australia. Fords we'd produce locally. Holden, which are part of the GM family, we'd produce locally. And so they came out with 6-cylinder family vehicles that were very popular and they wanted to sell. And that really influenced the power to weight ratio that we ended up with in our graduated licensing system restrictions. So,
is that something you can turn on the dial and have a switch where you buy one vehicle and you can control it?
No. This is very much about that the engine capacity being something that was locally produced, and from a government point of view, you want your local industry to thrive. So the threshold was just over that of that 6-cylinder vehicle. So P-platers could drive these locally produced 6-cylinder vehicles. How fast do you reckon those cars can go? Still
pretty good, I imagine.
Right. So when you're designing laws, they have to fit the need of the community that you're serving. And so, you talk about this restriction between those nighttime hours. Well, that acknowledges that people have got jobs. People have to, especially when you're young, you're working often in the service industry. You're working shift work. So I like that it allows people to still get around to live life. But yeah.
And there's an exemption for immediate family. That was another thing.
Right.
So there are reasons you could have it.
That makes sense.
But I like the idea of limiting. And I've had a number of pedestrian advocates who say, well, why does anyone need to go? I have a car that's capable of doing 300 kilometers an hour. Why don't we build cars that go to the speed limit?
Yeah.
And they're not wrong. We don't need something that goes faster unless you're taking it to the track, and that's a very specific type of car. And maybe it should be locked out from going faster when you're out. But would anyone buy a Corvette if you couldn't go over 100 kilometers an hour? There would be much less interest in buying those cars. They just sound cool, but don't go.
Yeah, and that's I think we're shifting back towards a more utilitarian view of cars. Electric and autonomous vehicles. They're white, they're smooth, they don't really look particularly good. I fell in love with motor vehicles. I'm not sure that my kids are going to fall in love with motor vehicles. I think the next generation, especially with the cost of living pressures we see now, much like the oil crisis back in the 80s, I think we'll see vehicle design shift more towards bang for buck rather than straight out bang.
Look what Elon Musk says. He says he sees a future where nobody owns their own vehicle and they just use it as they need it.
Yeah.
And when we do get to a truly autonomous state, why would you own a car? You're not driving it. You're not enjoying the process. It's just getting it from point A to point B.
Yeah.
There's a couple of shows I'll have to put you onto that on Netflix that where they all have autonomous vehicles. And it's off topic.
Cool.
Brandon says, should people caught stunt driving lose their license for a year and their car for 30 days? Just a thought. So, should we be increasing the consequences? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. How much of a punishment do you give someone on the first time? I mean, a 30-day suspension and a 14-day vehicle impound is already pretty severe. I remember stopping a chap on a motorcycle who was doing a good chuck above the speed limit, and he was a dump truck driver, and that meant he was getting fired, and that's what happens. But he chose it. A year of that's not being able to feed your family.
Yeah, and we see this with. So can I draw a parallel between the consequences for culpable driving? So that's where you've killed someone and you're criminally liable for causing that person's death. Well, at the moment in Victoria, the maximum penalty is 20 years. And sometimes we see like a pretty low part of that range being used by the courts. And it generates a lot of distress in the victims' families because, and this is not what the courts do, but it does send a message about the value of life. That, you killed someone and now you're doing 18 months in jail. So my husband, my daughter, whoever it is, was only worth 18 months. Mm-hmm. And so that's not a useful exercise to do. But what it does is it generates this desire within victims' families and victims' advocacy groups to increase the maximum penalty. But what we know is that if you're trying to change behaviour, which is ultimately what you're trying to do, having a big penalty is designed to deter people in the first place from engaging in that behaviour. If it's too abstract, the human mind can't comprehend. They can't. When you get behind the wheel, you're so accustomed to that process that you're not doing calculations about, okay, how long am I going to jail if this doesn't work out? These are very impulsive decisions often by young drivers who haven't got that prefrontal cortex fully developed. And I'm not sure that increasing the penalty, I don't think you'd see a change in behaviour.
But I also don't think that the courts are utilizing what they have available to them anyway. If you have a range more often than not, you're seeing courts utilize the smaller consequences and reserving that for repeat offenders, but no one ever sees that. At least I've not seen it.
Which, how much angst does that cause amongst police officers who do their best to prosecute the law and then have it rendered into a much lesser penalty at court? I think that it's a good thing that we're not in charge of the punishment. So don't get me wrong, the courts are doing a great job at what they need to do. And I just think that there sometimes needs to be a bit more representation of community value or community sentiment by the courts. Yeah.
Everyone's got different motivations, and very rarely do we all sit at the table and see the same benefit from the same discussion. It's tough. It's tough because a lot of emotion involved.
Yeah.
What are window tinting laws in Australia like? Can you tint front windshields?
No.
How about the windows directly left and right of the drive? Or let's just talk about tint.
Yeah, tint. So we've obviously lots of sunshine in most parts of Australia. You can tint your car windows, so you can tint the front windows as well, but only to a certain level. And I'd have to double check what that level is. But we've got window tint measuring devices, so you put one thing on one side of the window, another device on the other, and it gives you a reading. So if we suspect that it's too dark, we'll test it and then issue a defect notice, which requires the driver to modify it, like return the vehicle to a roadworthy state. Front windshields, you can't tint below the Australian standards line, so that's pretty much that top bar where you get the...
AS1 is Australian standard?
Oh, hang on.
It's funny because it's AS1 here too. I'm like, wait, is that all Australian?
No, maybe I'm thinking it's Australian standard because
I wonder.
Usually in any acronym, the A is Australian.
That couldn't be yeah. So
you probably called me out here and I'm probably wrong, but
it's good. I like
it's the same line, right? And so you can't tint below that. Yeah.
Awesome. So that was legal up until vehicles manufactured in 2017, and now no tint is permitted on the windshield in Ontario. The windows left and right of the driver can be tinted up until 30% light blockage, and that's for vehicle standard guide, so you can get certified with that.
Yep.
But if we can't see in, if it's because it's dark out, well, you can't see in, that's too dark, we can charge. So it depends on what you charge. If it's more than 30%, we can take you out of service, seize your plates, and require you to get safety again. So similar, very similar.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like it is a safety standard. It's not about the ability of law enforcement to look into your car. It's about your ability to look out and perceive hazards.
Well, so part of it here is being able to look, because the charge that we would lay for dark tint, even if it was legal for safety, is obscuring the interior of the motor vehicle, and that is so we can see if you're wearing your seatbelt, see if you're using your phone, describe the driver involved in a hit and run, make eye contact with the occupants for nonverbal communication. So there are elements that are so we can see inside. Okay. So, but it depends. The safety aspect that we get your license plates taken, that is because you cannot see out, and that is for a different purpose.
Right.
We don't take plates if we can't see you wearing a seatbelt.
Sure.
But I keep saying it's people are really set on not being able to pick their noses privately, but that's a different thing. Let's see here. I'm so glad that someone actually had an Australian specific question. What's your car theft? As I see here, this 420 says, have an AirTag in my truck stolen in Brantford, cops won't go. Are you having a stolen vehicle problem like we are in North America?
We've always had stolen vehicle problem. They're valuable. They'll get stolen. What that looks like has changed over the years. So you guys would have hot wiring of cars. We've got hot wiring of cars. People wanted... sometimes the need is different. So you've got organised motor vehicle theft rackets who will steal vehicles to export them into other countries. So sometimes you'll see, we had a really interesting one where a local plumbing truck from like outer suburbs ended up with a gun on the back. In the Middle East. So that's a very fringe case. But if we describe it as a problem, I'd say the access of youths when they're committing crimes, stealing cars and then driving recklessly in those vehicles, that's probably the thing we're really trying to tackle at the moment. It's compounded by the fact that you're dealing with young people, and so we have to remind ourselves that they are children and that we need to protect them as much as everyone else around them. So that's one of the philosophical challenges, is we're not dealing with someone who's had a life of crime and is insistent on this. We still regard this as an opportunity to intervene and change that person's life.
I think that's for every interaction. There's a possibility that this is a misstep versus a hardcore
You're
criminal.
right. Yeah, but it's more pronounced, I think, with our children, is that we have a sense of responsibility to those people. So, but it's frustrating because they get out at night, they steal these cars, they'll kick people's doors in to steal the keys. People feel unsafe. A lot of these children look like adults.
Isn't that scary?
At some point, the hormones kick in, they start to grow. They're big people with young minds. So really challenging. They'll steal high-end vehicles, and that creates challenges for us, but also opportunities to use connected vehicle technology to learn where they are. Was it one of your viewers mentioned AirTags, being able to track the location of the car, and then formulate our response around opportunities, not just to chase it until someone dies, but to effect an arrest when the car's stopped, or recover the vehicle when there's no one near it. These are the policing challenges we have, because if we just get behind a car and pursue it, we know from history that generally that's going to end badly. And we've been through the coroner's court with a few cases that have forced us to reflect on our policing.
Car chases, there's so many different options if need be. But I like different types of approaches, like identifying who the driver is when you can see through the window prior to the start of a stop, so that it's not something where we're pushing you and seen as the egging you to go faster, which is what usually the accusation is. Well, you made them run because you chased them. but the truth is, very often we don't need to go there. We can very easily, stop people and get a cooperative. Someone's calling me. I'm not answering it.
And when it ends poorly, right? When someone dies, when the pursued driver dies, and you look back, it's not often that you're dealing with a higher order offense.
Mm-hmm.
Often this person's unlicensed or perhaps under the influence. These are not things we should be dying for, and so it becomes part of our risk profile. But returning to the original question about vehicle theft, it's a problem everywhere. It is in Australia. I think some countries, people point to Singapore as often a place where people just observe the law regardless. They've still got jails, which tells you that not everyone does obey the law.
Certainly.
So a fair question, but I'm not sure that it's all that much different to the US.
Do you find, and I don't know how much exposure you've had to this, but we've been seeing relay thefts and most recently a rise in people breaking in to take the keys, because now the keys are valuable. So it's not just take the car. Now we want the whole package.
This is the unintended consequence of an evolution in vehicle design, where the security systems are now, it's hard, you really can't hotwire a car. All right, well, it's in cybersecurity, it's called the $5 wrench principle. I just need to buy a $5 wrench and beat someone over the head, and that bypasses most, like any sophisticated password system, right? So, it's one of these unintended consequences where, all right, well, just get the keys, kick the door in, get the keys, and you're on your way. So, I think vehicle manufacturers, a few of who I'm meeting on this trip that I'm on, I've been having those discussions with them, and some of it's not fit for public consumption, obviously, because they don't want to reveal too much about what they're doing. But
certainly,
I think as we move towards what Elon Musk describes as automated future, I'm sure we'll see a reduction in the way we treat the motor vehicle as a toy.
It'll be interesting to see where we end up. I'm looking forward to the movie and the Coles notes.
Right.
But Mac Daddy, it's an original name, says, just a reminder to everyone, leave your keys at the door for safety. What a joke. What this person is referencing is, recently we had an officer attend a town hall and give some advice, like putting on a club-like event, steering wheel block, brake pedal lock, Faraday bags, gave tons of great advice. And then it also said, but the update to the advice that we used to give, which was hide your keys, don't leave them at the front door. The new advice is leave them at the front door. Because if someone is willing to break into your home in the middle of the night to get your keys, let them find them and leave, as opposed to come drag you out of bed at gunpoint.
Right.
And we switch from theft reduction to harm reduction. And of course, many people, including Mac Daddy, thinks that's funny because they think that we're enabling theft as opposed to protecting life.
Yeah.
And if you had similar sort of situations where you've reverted to giving advice on those lines, or
yeah, so it's not prescriptive, right? It's not, if you do this, you won't fall victim to crime. But there are some things, some steps you can take to reduce the harm of crime. So that's one thing. We often give presentations to community groups who want to understand, well, how do I reduce the likelihood of my house being selected for a burglary? So we tell them, remove the shrubberies and foliage from the front so your neighbours can actually see in, so any intruder will feel exposed and vulnerable. Lighting systems. All these are like pretty sound pieces of advice. Does that mean everyone has to follow it, or that everyone's got the same appetite for risk? No. Similarly, the keys at the front door. I've heard that as well. And if you play it through, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? Like, I don't want to be woken up by a machete-wielding bandit. I'll leave the keys at the front door because that's all they're interested in. That's your decision, right? It's still a crime to break into someone's house.
For sure.
It's not enabling. It's not encouraging. We're just saying, if you want to change the outcome, if you don't want to be woken up, then that's one way to do it. Then the counter argument is then, well, this is a policing problem. Why don't you catch these criminals instead of measuring my speed on the highway? Well, we do, but we would need such a huge membership in our police force to provide that sort of deterrent. Well, we're talking like a patrolman on every street.
Sure. To prevent theft.
Right. Next question. Is that the world you want to live in?
Well, I mean, obviously the people who think that we shouldn't be stopping cars are not happy with people being stopped and ticketed for actions they possibly engage in.
Yep.
I think that's the first part. And second, they see tremendous value to the other half where people believe we're not effective enough. But I've put out a video asking for people to help with a fail to remain. And the comments have been, you're the cop, you do your job.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that our job is to communicate with the public, to get information that the public may have, to then go and find said bad person and hold them accountable. But the people are the police are the people. We are part of, keeping right and wrong in its appropriate category.
And these, if you look at the root causes, these are complex social issues. Why does a kid put on a hoodie, kick in someone's door while they're armed to steal the keys to a car? Like, we don't have the time to go through that problem today, but there are underpinning conditions. So their access to education, the way they feel included in society, the role models they have, the hand of five, the 5 people nearest to you sort of determine what sort of person you are. Do that exercise with some of these kids that you get into custody, and you find out that they are the product of some pretty bad influence. So I urge people not to look at these issues through a very confined lens, a microscopic view of a particular crime issue, because they're all interrelated. And if we start to attack advice like leaving keys in certain places, I think we're ignoring the fact that it's only advice. We'll continue to do our best in policing circles to prevent crime and deter it from occurring, and then, of course, investigate it when it does occur. Mm-hmm. But, I'm still yet to see a system that works flawlessly.
I like that. I mean, really identifying the fact that it's advice and not an instruction that you must follow. But it is, I mean, when you measure and weigh everything, I'd sooner say goodbye to my car than, my left arm or my kid or somebody, just a trauma from it. Like, just never mind the worst case scenario. Just having that experience would be horrible.
Yeah, that's my personal view as well. And I know that some people are a bit more gung-ho about it and would invite the confrontation. Don't do it. It's not going to play out like you think it will. Yeah.
I think very few people are capable of defending themselves effectively while sleeping.
Yeah. And even if it's successful, when you pull the hoodie off that kid, you're going to realize it's a kid. And, it's,
It's a new set of problems.
A
couple of people said, why are we talking about Australia? And then someone else said, because I think the guest is from Australia. So they've had some dialogue here. But then AJ Taneet says, what's the entry salary for a police officer in Ontario? And that gets me to switch channels for a second, to look at the careers page, which is available at tps.ca/careers. It's funny that we'd have a website that has our police name in it, followed by the word careers to give that kind of information. But let's have a look. So on this magical page, you will see this group of happy people. They've applied and been accepted for jobs that are posted here. Now, if you go to Police Constable, all the details of policing are there, along with a big old button that says you can apply now. What is do you know the entry level wage in Australia for policing?
So when you go into your recruit phase, it changes every year, so I don't keep an active track on it. But when you go into the recruit phase, where you spend 5 months learning how to become a police officer, I think that's about the late 50s, early 60,000 Australian dollars. Once you're actually sworn in and graduate and head out onto the road, I believe the starting salary is somewhere around $76,000 or $78,000. But it's all available publicly online, and I might be completely out of touch. I've been doing it for 20 years, so it's been a long time since I've been paid that particular.
Well, it wasn't what I got paid when I got out, but now $68,864 as a cadet in training while you're at the college. You graduate into fourth class constable role at $76,533. Roughly a year later, $87,476. Then the following $98,400, and then first class constable. And I don't know what the exchange rate is. What, do you know roughly what it is?
It's pretty close.
Is it?
Yeah.
So right now we're just shy of we're 109,338, so we'll say just shy of $110,000. And I know that some jurisdictions have gotten contracts to see in the next 5 years that going up to $130,000 for a first-class constable. But the question was about someone right out of the college. And that's going to be under 80, but over 70. It's 76.5.
Right out of college? Yeah, right. That was me. I joined when I was 19.
Right on.
Yeah. And it was the best move I made. Putting salary aside, don't tell anyone, but I'd probably do it for free.
That was always my opinion.
Yeah.
I said, give me the badge and a gun and let me go, help people. And I just need a place to sleep.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There are bad days.
Sure.
But the intensity of the value you feel when you help someone like properly, and you can't plan it. These opportunities just pop up, and you're given the chance to do a great job, a good job or a great job. And when you do a great job, it's ultra rewarding. Whether that be an investigation into a complex crime, or just helping someone recover their bicycle when it's the only way they get around. It's a nice feeling.
It's people helping people. It's incredibly rewarding. I used to be an auxiliary. I started as a volunteer.
Right.
And that was because there was a hiring freeze. There was a bunch of things going on. But I had so much fun that I said, I have to figure out how to do this as my day.
You did it for free.
I did do it for free.
Right.
And then I did it for free on top of getting paid for it as a court officer doing courthouse security and prisoner transportation. And then I got very comfortable. I was really doing two things that I loved, and then eventually applied to become a police constable. And it's been the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
It's a job that I suggest. It's not for everybody, but for those who think it might be, you should definitely explore it, because there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and exploring is a great way to do it. I joined, and the workforce at that time were like long-term police officers. Like they were almost everyone made a career out of it, like a full-blown, lifelong career. I'm not sure how we're going to go now with the change of attitude, where people want to have sort of 7 careers in a lifetime. I welcome that idea. I'm interested to see how it plays with policing.
We sort of have 7 careers, at least in our service. You start as a patrol officer at a division. You might go into the Criminal Investigation Bureau, maybe the Youth Bureau, maybe community response, where you get to go to barbecues and bicycle around. Maybe you get into the dog handling, or in the tactical unit, or the boats and Marine, motor squad. Like we do have the ability of having many different jobs within a career. So there is a bit for for those of us who are mildly ADD and want something new and challenging all the time.
Great point. And that's my experience too, is that I went from city policing to country policing. I've done drug squad type investigations, organised crime, like collision investigation. We have to learn how to read a scene and reconstruct based on the length of a yaw mark or a skid mark on the road. These are really stimulating things, and now I'm in a different space. I'm looking at the strategic aspect of how we deliver road policing back in Australia. So you are spot on. There are careers within this career.
But that's not to say you can't move on to other things. We had somebody that, I don't know the details, but I think they developed a video game. They left to become a software developer. We have people who came from medicine, were medical doctors, and decided they wanted to be police officers. So you know what? You got to do what's right for you. And I will say this. If you become a member of a police service, you develop skills and abilities that you cannot get anywhere else doing anything else. It really is a unique set of skills that are then transferable into all areas of your life. Like you won't trust anybody. No, I'm kidding. You suddenly you see things from a different perspective. The veil is lifted, and you see what's under the hood in all areas of things. And I think that's important. I think everyone should do it. Just like I think that we'd benefit from having like mandatory military service to some degree. I think having a stint as a police officer really gets you ready for understanding anything else you do.
Yeah.
But I'm biased. I think this is the right way to do things. Bloodshot Eyes says, great channel. Keep up the great work. And
Bloodshot?
They're Bloodshot. That's their username on YouTube. They also said that they prefer watching on TikTok. I don't know why. Let's see here. There were some questions I want to try and race to the end because we are kind of over time. I originally wanted to move quickly, but we've had such a great conversation. It's been
I've really enjoyed it.
This is one that if you find your way back again, or even if you want to do this remotely when you're back home, let me know. We'd love to have you back on.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Can cops search your car in a parking lot without you being present and without cause? We have very specific requirements in order to search a vehicle. You know, and again, this might be an interesting difference in laws, but if you're there and I have reason to believe there's something that that is in plain view, then there might be a reason to search. But in most cases, I'm looking for a search warrant. It depends. Vehicle stop related things, alcohol related things, all give us different avenues into the vehicle.
Yeah, same in Australia. It's a complex issue, and it should be complex. It should be difficult for a police officer to, not difficult, but it should require a level of authority that is clear about why you're being searched or why your property is being searched.
And it could be a search for the purposes like we're impounding the vehicle. We need to do an inventory search, and then we could do a search just to make sure that you're protected. We're actually searching it for your benefit, which is to make sure that that there's no gold bars in there that could go missing in the pound, and then that wouldn't be returned to you because we have no documentation of it, which is different than, let's say we came across a key of cocaine in the back of the trunk while we were doing an inventory search for towing the vehicle, and now we have an issue because now we need to stop, get a warrant, and it changes the way we're proceeding. But people just think we're just willy-nilly doing whatever we want, and then we're going to hold them accountable for everything.
Yeah.
And the goal is to hold people accountable, but only if we can do things by the book.
It's got to be by the book.
Yeah. What's the most amount of tickets you gave out during a day? I've never kept score. I write as many as I want. I was told I could write as many as I wanted, so I've always tried.
Yeah.
But I've never been told I had to write a certain number, and some days were won because I ended up getting involved in some big investigation or called to do something like take a motorcycle to a kids event so they can sit on it. It's not all about enforcement, even though enforcement is an important element. It's not all about enforcement.
Stupid question. How do you issue your citations here?
So on the motorcycles, it used to be by pen and paper on a triplicate form. We now have laptops in all of our vehicles that are capable of issuing thermal printed citations, and we do just that. It's all generated by our computer system. There is the backup of being able to use the paper copy, but more often than not, it's electronic.
Yeah. Would you guys like to see an electronic invoice style of ticketing? Like
email version?
Yeah.
I think that's actually the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
I think that using thermal paper and having you have one page that is because you can't print on both sides. So what would have been the buck on the back with the instructions on what to do is now a second piece of paper.
Okay.
So for every offense, you get a piece of paper that says, here's the charge, a second piece of paper saying, here's what to do in response. And I think it might even be a third piece of paper, maybe that was only during COVID, where we gave information about what to do during this unusual time.
Right.
So it was 3 pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper for every offense. So if I charged you with 7 offenses, we're getting to be a lot of paper.
Yeah. So on a windy day, you're fluttering back to the violator's window and trying to...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm trying, because it all wants to roll up on that tight little fax paper roll.
Yeah.
Does anyone know what a facsimile is? But anyway, you'd roll it, you try and make it so that... It's interesting. I'd love to be able to say, here's a business card, here's a barcode, scan it, you'll get it, or what have you. Yeah. So I'm sure, is that something you guys are doing now?
We're exploring the possibility of electronic infringement notices, but there are some hurdles to that. So actually knowing where to send it, because people don't have their email printed on them. So if you've got a driver who doesn't really want to reveal or disclose their email address, well, how do you actually electronically send that person something?
Well, I imagine if you were to write down the ticket, well, it's associated with their license, whether they choose to do anything with it or not.
Right.
But if you gave them the ticket number on a single piece of a business card, and they could then log in and handle it from their side, might work. And if they lost it, well, they could always go back into the ministry and say, here's my driver's license, and find it. So I think that there's a way to deal with it.
There'd be a way.
I wonder what that username is. Halien, I don't know what it is. Can you wrap your car in Ontario? A lot of people wrap their cars. It's not a legal issue. However, you have to update the Ministry of Transportation with the new color. and you have 6 days to make that change.
Right.
Is that the same deal there?
I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
Because if you paint your car, it's orange instead of green. The big problem is people don't realize that your car is not what it is on the registration. So when we run that, and we have automatic license plate readers that can do that now, we'll see a car that is blue in front of us and green on the paper, and now you're getting pulled over for possibly stolen plates or stolen vehicle.
Yeah. But what color would you call some of those wraps that are like
Mirror.
and yeah?
Well, it could be multicolor. It could be all sorts of things. But it's a good question.
Yeah.
Leopard
print.
Leopard print. Yeah, it'd be multicolored.
Yeah.
I've seen some strange things. Camo. Zach Wilfred Johnson says, "Is he Aussie?"
Yeah, mate. Do I need to get more? Do I need to dial it up?
You might need to kick it into overdrive.
Yeah.
You're not faking. Jay Helmy says, "I'm a cop in Colorado. I'm wondering if your pursuit policy. Sorry, I'm wondering on your pursuit policy if it exists." So pursuit policy is interesting because, it is a pursuit. It's deemed a pursuit the moment someone chooses not to respond appropriately to the activation of police lights and pulling over. So if I turn on my lights and siren to tell you to pull over and you don't pull over, you have turned that stop into a pursuit. Now, once it could be a misunderstanding that in 10 feet you realize, oh, no, you're really for me, and pull over. Okay, that's no longer, it's really hasn't hit that threshold. But and then there's no harm done. But I've been in a slow speed pursuit for 10 kilometers where the person's just out to lunch on their phone.
Yeah.
And is it a pursuit? They really didn't understand what was going on. It wasn't an intentional departure. So I didn't, pursue them with additional charges. But they did get all the tickets that they were getting for being on the red light that they ran and so on and so forth. They were really not paying attention.
Yeah.
When it comes to safety, if it is a pursuit and we've acknowledged that it's a pursuit, we're chasing somebody, it has to be for a reason worthy of putting lives at risk.
Mm-hmm.
There has to, and at that time, what you call a pursuit, anybody on the channel can say that we're calling it off. Whether it be myself, another officer on the road, maybe they know something up ahead is going to put people in harm's way. They can call it, the dispatcher can call it, the supervisor, anybody who is party to knowing that this exists can call it off. And of course, the person who's running away can choose to stop.
Yeah. I think that's the key point. And I prefer not to talk about our pursuit policy because it should be simple to the public. If you see blue and red behind you, pull over to the left. Well, in Australia. It's different, of course, in the North American countries. But I will say this, though, is that an ongoing risk assessment is always required.
Yes.
To understand where we're at in that continuum. Because it changes. It can change in an instant. And I think I mentioned at the start of this that it's not always hardened criminals that we're chasing. Sometimes we're talking about kids, and we also share the risk with others on the road.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not contained to just the violator and the pursuing law enforcement agency. So, yeah, fair question. Colorado, I'm sure it's different. I've seen a lot of difference across the states. Where I've been in California, Texas, and Michigan, and everyone does it slightly different.
Well, as a police officer, if you want to reach out to us, you can go to TrafficCop.ca. There's a submission form there. We can reach out to you with police channels and discuss things in a different environment.
Yeah.
But you're right. People should simply do the right thing and not run. And I'm seeing all sorts of people who are absolutely. They're on the road with the intention to run. There's people running license plate free motorcycles. There's no license, no insurance, no nothing, and they say, "I'm just going to go for it," for whatever their motivation is.
Yeah.
So they're already starting things with a bad attitude, making poor choices.
Right.
Let's say here, I got Justine asked something that may be in French, so I can't help you there. I'm not sure what we're talking about here. So other than the how's your day going, which is great so far, I thank you for asking. And we have gone over time, and because I know you've got other things to see and do.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. You may not be here tomorrow, but
I'll hop on my kangaroo and
hop off.
Off.
But or hop along, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been awesome having you here.
My pleasure.
It's really been a lot of fun, and we'll have to do this again, maybe remotely. I'll have to stay here until the time change lines up.
Yeah, no, it was great chatting with you, and some of the questions, like feeling that engagement with the community. I love what you're doing here because this is it, right? This is the interface between what people want to know and what we do.
And I will acknowledge that many people wanted to know a lot more, and we didn't get to all of your questions because we got into deep discussions over things that took us out of our regular flow of bang, 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 just answering questions. But this is awesome to do things a little different once in a while. So tomorrow we can get back into the flow of how we normally roll, bringing your traffic and police questions, that rapid fire type of scenario. But we're doing it again, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Tune in and share and like and follow and do all that jazz. Helps us out because all we try and do here is bring education and engagement to more people. So help us out. You don't have to, but you can choose to be awesome. Anyway, have a great day. And what does I like to say? I like to play the traffic song. This was written and performed by a police officer right here. You've never heard it, so I'll let you enjoy.
Yellow light, red light, green light, go. Driving safely helps the traffic flow. Watch for pedestrians, look out for bikes, and don't drive like a jerk that no one likes. Yellow light, red light, green light, go. Driving safely is the way to go. Put down your cell phone, nobody needs you to text and drive on the DVP. Yellow light, red light, green light, go. Stop at stop signs, look both ways, then go. Seatbelt, save your life indeed. And watch your driving, don't speed. Yellow light, red light, green light, go. Driving safely is the way to go. Don't drink and drive or smoke some weed, because you might go to jail and not get free. Yellow light, red light, green light, go. Driving safely helps the traffic flow.
A shout out to Human Moves Day Camp, who says, have a great day. Thanks again to everyone who's tuned in. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. In the meantime, drive safe, drive sober, park legally, because we have to cover off Aaron, our parking enforcement guru, who often talks about parking, because they're the parking guru. So do that. And, of course, smile because it looks good on you. Even you, Bob.